Peace everyone, Unmask Art here, and today I'm going to show you how to color this dime. I colored this coin as part of the Color Pencil Magazine workshop series, and you can find the written version of this tutorial in this month's issue. I'll have a link below in the description. Also in the description, you'll find a link to the reference photo in the line art for this drawing if you want to put your skills to the test. So before I begin, let's go over the supplies I used for this drawing. I am coloring on Strathmore Bristol plate paper. This is my favorite paper. I use Zest It solvent to blend my colored pencils, and I do that using a number 4 round brush. There's nothing special about my round brush. It is just some off-brand, no-name, super cheap brush, so nothing special there. I will be using these 11 Prismacolor pencils to complete this project, so this is a super friendly budget project. Alright, so let's get started. Use the line art to transfer the drawing of the dime to your favorite paper. The lines you will see outline the shapes of the shadows and the pure white highlights. The method I use is back tracing. I use scrap paper for my sketch, then I use graphite on the back to trace the sketch to my final paper. The next step is to begin establishing the shadows of our coin. To do this, I use black to shape the circular edge of the dime. Take your time with this part because it is very important that your coin stays perfectly round. I also use yellow ochre and cad orange to fill the appropriate spaces around the black. Another dominant color in the shadow is Tuscan Red. Here it is important to work slowly with a great deal of precision, leaving the highlights untouched by my colors. Once I have the outermost edges, I continue working in all the shadows of the detailed lettering and design. You will quickly recognize the pattern of light around the beveled edges of the text and other details. This step isn't technically difficult, just tedious, and if you lose your patience, you will make mistakes. Keep in mind the light source is coming from the right. The black stays on all the left-facing planes, whereas the Tuscan Red wraps around towards the light. Now that all the details are complete, I'll move on to something a bit easier for a nice change of pace. So it's time to create a cast shadow to make the dime stand off the page. This will make the drawing look more three-dimensional as well. I'm going to start with a light layer of peach beige over the entire cast shadow area. I use this as kind of shaping the shadow and placing it where it needs to be. Then I use the dark brown and Tuscan Red and the cool gray to create a gradient, a smooth cast shadow that fades into the white of the paper. For this step, I will be using solvent to smooth the pencils. However, be sure to layer sufficiently before using your solvent. There really isn't much point to blending otherwise. You may also use white at the edges if you struggle making the edge of the shadow fade into the paper. You can also use black right along the edge of the coin to help separate it from the shadow. Before coloring the center, I decided to first color the flat circular edge around the coin to preserve that circular shape. For the base layer, I used the peach beige, then I used the yellow ochre, clay rose, beige sienna, and the cool gray to establish the light coming across the surface. So far, all the way up to this point, I pay careful attention to avoid all of the pure white highlights. Remember, the pure white highlights are outlined in the line art. Maximizing the contrast will make all the difference in the end. I then finish by smoothing with a bit of solvent. Now, before moving on, I just want to mention that Color Pencil Magazine has a Patreon page and it has some great rewards. For For just $3 a month, you can get each month's issues, and it's a great resource for techniques and lessons just like this, and a wonderful source of inspiration. Now, as of recording this video, Colored Pencil Magazine hasn't reached their 100 Patreon goal, so I figured let's help them get there, because a rising tide lifts all boats. Now, getting back to our project here, the time has come to fill in the flat surface that all of the details sit on. I start by applying the peach beige to the entire area around all of the text, raised design, and pure white highlights. I use a light medium pressure, never harder than what is required for the color to show up. That's kind of my rule. Now, up to this point, I haven't expressed my goal for this project. You see, I'm not going for photorealism here. Instead, I'm just going for regular realism. And I'm gonna have a bit of fun with my colors. However, if you want to add another level of realism, pay very close attention to your pencil stroke direction. Always move it in the direction of the coin texture. Otherwise, you can just fill in this area like I am here. Okay, with the layer of beige complete, I then use the Henna, Clay Rose, and Beige Sienna, Lilac, and Cool Gray to create a gradient of color on the surface. This is where I consciously stray from photorealism and use my artistic license to make my dime bright and colorful, as opposed to cold and metallic. To do this, I just amplify the color saturation with what would otherwise just be subtle color. Just be sure not to affect the overall values. Notice that the darkest values of the surface occur around the bottom third. So do not be afraid to go dark using the cool gray, especially if you want more realism. That cool gray will also help control your saturation. Now that the base colors are down, it's time to add some texture. But before that, I blend with solvent to smooth it all. If you look closely at the reference, the surface of the dime has a very particular texture pattern that originates at the very center point of the coin. You can treat that center like a vanishing point and use it to guide your pencil strokes for adding the texture detail. To add these lines, I use the cool gray, the henna, and the clay rose. Do this repeatedly and mix your colors to get the results that you want. There is a lot of leniency here, so there's no need to stress. Just know that more time you put in does not imply a better outcome. Sometimes less is more. The final stage is to use the peach beige as a base color to fill the top surface of the text and design while leaving the pure white highlights. Remember, all the way up to this point, we have completely avoided all of the pure white highlights with our pencils. We haven't touched them at all. So after you have that base color, then what you'll do is you'll use the henna, clay rose, beige sienna, and lilac, and the cool gray to create the gradient and detail on the surface. This step is pretty much identical to step 8. The only difference is we're working on a different part of the dime. Then, once you have all of the colors down, blend with solvent to make it smooth. Alright everyone, here is the finished dime. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, let me know by commenting below and giving the video a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future tutorials. Also, make sure you go over to Colored Pencil Magazine's Patreon page to start getting your monthly magazine. And if you want to learn more colored pencil techniques from me, or pastel for that matter, join me on my Patreon page where I do live tutorials every week. Hope to see you there, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.